Hey guys, it's Air from Just My Typewriter, and sometimes I give away typewriters. So I've done this a few times where I'll have friends who say they want a typewriter, or someone I know who's looking for a typewriter, and I'll just give them a machine. I have plenty, and I'm always looking to rehome them. That's part of the whole foster mom of typewriters thing. And I did have someone in my life who was looking to add some typewriters to their classroom about a year ago. So I sent them to their room with a Smith Corona Sterling from the 1940s and a Smith Corona Sterling from the 1960s. Over the course of the year, 8th and 9th graders were messing around with these typewriters, so I just got them back to clean and service them, and I wanted to go through some of the damage or imperfections that happened throughout that year and what can happen when people are using typewriters and how you can clean it up after use. So these two machines I've had in my collection for a little bit, and I did decide to rehome them because I have had quite a few Smith Coronas. I chose these machines specifically because I find Smith Coronas to be incredibly hardy, especially machines from the 1950s and 60s. From the 5 Series line, these are my favorite typewriters. These are also my first recommendation to any first-time buyers. Anytime someone asks me what typewriter should I get, these are the ones that I go for because I think that they're super easy to use. They're also very easy to clean and service, and they just overall have a really easy feel to them, and they hold up really well. So the first of these two typewriters is my 1949 Smith Corona Sterling. I've had this in my collection for quite some time. I picked it up at an estate sale for $15, I think. And it just is an overall really good machine. However, I don't use it very often because I tend to go for the 1950s version of these machines more often than not. Now, there are a couple things missing on this typewriter. It is missing a plate cover on the one side that was pointed out in one of my previous videos, but overall it's in pretty good condition, and I really enjoyed having this machine. I did give this to the classroom because I thought this would be a really great kind of entry-level machine for newer users. Then over the course of that summer, I was flea marketing, and somewhere between Adamstown and where I was living, I ran into an antique mall and came home with this 1960 Smith Corona Sterling in green. Now this is my Dave's Girl machine. On the front of it, it does say "I love Dave," and it's written in whiteout, and I thought that was so funny and fascinating. I left it on the machine. It was a cute little characteristic that I left. So it also went to the classroom for the course of the year. I decided to go with two Sterlings because they were both well built, in my opinion. They hold up really well, and I also thought it was interesting to have one from the 1940s and one from the 1960s in the same classroom so students could see the difference between the models as they were using them. So after a year, I brought these to my new home, and I went through the process of cleaning them again. Now, on machines that I've already previously cleaned, I just do a light cleaning. I don't take anything out of them. You can take the covers off, but I found just a really quick little air dusting is really effective at getting out any dust or pencil shavings or things you might have in a classroom. I also then did clean the outside, so you get people touching the machines. They might adjust the ribbon and then touch the outsides. So I did go through a simple green and also clean out the exterior cases. And that seemed to fix most of the problems. There were still a few keys on both machines that were a little bent. So what happens when your type slug gets bent is it doesn't fit directly into the ribbon vibrator, and it'll get yourself stuck. So you might hit a key and it gets stuck up there. That could be a couple things. Your type slug's track could be dirty. It has dust in it, it has grime in it, it has oil in it, and typically you can clean those out. But I've just serviced these machines about a year before this, so I knew that it was probably not a cleaning issue, as I had already done that process on both of these machines. So for me, what I determined happened is students would go through, type in the typewriter, hit a key really hard and get it lodged up in there, and then when they pull it down, they might bend it slightly. So what I did is I went through and determined the keys that were not hitting correctly. I would go through the keyboard, see which ones came up and returned and which ones got stuck, and then I would just slightly bend the type slugs until they would reach the typewriter ribbon vibrator and then fall back down easily with no hiccups in their travel path. So this is a process you can do on machines. It's very easy to go through and fix some of these things. The difficulty here is if you bend any of the type slugs too far. These are more malleable than some of the other pieces of metal on your machine, and they can snap. I have run into type slugs that have been resoldered together because the tops of them had fallen off. So you don't want to bend anything too far to the point where you can't get it back together. So I went through the keyboard, determined which ones were getting stuck, and then I started by using pliers just to bend them slightly so they would fit back into the ribbon vibrator, and anything after that I just used my hands to slightly make adjustments until they would travel all the way up and all the way back down. I then did another air compressing of these machines and they were good to go. Now, after talking to the teacher that I donated these to, I did learn a couple things about how the students were using these typewriters. So they were out all the time for the entire year. They were on little desks or typewriter tables that the students could access them at any time. And they were left just kind of out in the open with paper in them. So we did have some issues where students might not know how they work. So they didn't know how to use the keys or where the enter button was, and that can lead to them fiddling with it. There was some consensus that the older machine, the 1949 machine, held up a little bit better. There was no kind of issue with using that machine. And so he asked me to switch out the green machine for next year. So he'll take back the 1949 Sterling, and I'll swap out something for that later 60s Sterling. If you have any suggestions with what might be good in a classroom for younger people to be using throughout a year, let me know in the comments below. I'm always looking for recommendations for the best machines to give to younger users. So I am going to be looking for a machine to swap out for that 1960 Sterling, and then I have to figure out what to do with the green Sterling because I kind of love it. Now, when it comes to selecting typewriters for people you don't know or for younger users, it's all about what do they value. In these instances, I think that the best thing to value is being really hardy and solid, and also something that's very easy to use. Anything that's too complicated or has too many buttons, I think magic margins are probably too confusing for these environments. Those are more likely to end up with issues. What you find is with people who don't know how typewriters work, sometimes they'll run into something that they don't know how to undo, and they'll just start shoving things or pushing stuff. A carriage lock that locks your carriage in place, if they don't know how it works, they might just start pushing on that carriage until they break something. And that happens all the time. That is not an uncommon thing. And so I find that machines that are easy to use or don't have as many bells and whistles usually are the best to give to a non-typewriter user because they are a little bit more intuitive to figure out. The other thing that I think is really important here is you want something a little bit more hardy. I don't think any plastic machines would hold up really well in these environments, so anything from the 60s that's in the plastic body style, I don't think would be really effective in these environments. I think ultra portables, while they're a really good size for these types of places, are just not heavy enough to be really effective. The other thing here is that the teacher has to carry it into the classroom, so I don't want to give them anything too big, like a desk manual. Although that would hold up really well, it's asking a little bit too much to have it take up an entire desk and be super heavy. So I'm thinking a portable machine, probably from the 50s. For me, those are the best built machines. They're usually made out of metal, and they're a little bit easier to understand or comprehend. So that's kind of what I think when I am tasked with finding the typewriter for someone I don't know or for younger users where we're getting heavy use. I tend to stick with those priorities. Overall, I think experiences like this or experiments like this where you are giving a typewriter to somebody and you're getting feedback from them about how they use it is really helpful. It's also really helpful for me to go back and see how my repairs or cleaning have done after a year. A lot of typewriter repair techs have been doing this for decades and for years and years, and they get to see their repair jobs and see how long and how well they hold up. I don't have that experience because I've only been doing this for about 6 years, so I don't always get to see machines that I've cleaned and how long that clean holds up unless they're in my own collection. And for the most part, I've kind of narrowed down my cleaning process to mostly consist of air compressing, mineral spirits, and simple green cleaning on the outside. And that does a lot of work for me, and it works really well over the course of time. I haven't had any issues with stuff growing back on the keys or things falling out of them or springs not holding up during that cleaning process. So for me, that's kind of the easiest way to service a machine in a very minimal, non-invasive way on the typewriter, and to see how that held up in the classroom over a continued use was really effective for informing my cleaning process. I learned quite a bit about how non-typewriter users will use their typewriter and things to watch out for on those machines. If you're a collector or are just starting to get into collecting, I highly recommend giving typewriters to people. I know that's not the same for everybody, and if you're purchasing these machines at a higher cost, that's a much bigger ask. But I think it's really important as collectors to be aware of the fact that you can only use one typewriter at a time, and I fall victim to this all the time. I have way more typewriters in my collection than I will ever use, but every once in a while I'm given the opportunity to give a machine to someone, and I think that's a really great part of being a collector. Not only can you give them a writing utensil that could be really helpful or incredibly effective for them, I've given them to writers before, and it's been a really informative process giving them to someone, but I also think it's really important to share these with younger users, and anytime there's a younger person in my life who's like, I would like to try a typewriter, I give them one. I think it's really important to kind of foster this love for typewriters and mechanical engineering at a very young age. Because if you start when you're 10 years old with a typewriter, by the time you're 25, you've learned how to repair them and fix them, and that's a really important craft that is important to keep up in the collecting community, as well as just in general. If you have any other typewriter recommendations for younger users, leave them in the comments down below so we can have a running list of kind of the best models to give to a newer typewriter user. And if you have any experience giving away typewriters or giving them to schools or libraries, let us know about them in the comments below so we can all kind of share our stories of our donations in the typewriter sphere, typewriter universe, something like that. If you're interested in more typewriter content, I do some other videos on this YouTube channel, as well as on Instagram at just.my.typewriter. And I thank you all so much for watching, and remind you, you're just my typewriter.